Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good. It's not too cold here, at least. Now, what is it to be an Indian? What makes an Indian different? What we see today is that there is a leveling of values in India. That Indians, are good students, they're bright people, they're good copiers, they can copy well. So we see that in India, there is an urge, there is a push to be on par with the West. That soon Indians are going to look, except for the colors, not much different from what you see in the West, in terms, of course, of quality in education, but in terms of habits, in terms of interest, in terms of what they read, in terms of what film they see. And that will be a great loss, not only to India, but to the whole of humanity. When I travel to the US, there's a huge Indian community there. And most of them also strive, to merge into the mainstream, to become as Americans as the Americans, to speak with an American accent, which is fine, to think American, to do American. Yet, it's a big loss to them and a big loss to the US, because there is something unique about this country. There is something unique about your country. And if you lose that, it's a tremendous loss to the whole of the world, because today there are in India values which the world needs to survive. We see today that the world is in the grip, of a war, of a civilizational war. And there are in India values that teach universality, that teach love, that teach compassion, and these are being lost. Now, in the name of your university, there are three words, Banaras, okay, fine, we're in Banaras, Hindu, university. Now, the word Hindu is very important to me, and it's a very misused word, because in the old days, every Indian was called a Hindu, whether he was Muslim, whether he was Christian, whether he was Jain, whether he was Buddhist, whether he was what's called Hindu today, because the word comes from the river Indus. So colonizers, invaders called everybody a Hindu. It just, in time, Hindus become separated and Muslim became separated and Christian became separated. But there is a universality in Hinduism which is totally forgotten today, even by Hindus. If you take, for instance, yoga. Now, yoga is so popular today in the world. Every Hollywood star practices yoga. If you see Hollywood films today, there are many films where the star, the hero, the heroine does some yoga pose. Even in some TV serials, there are some very famous TV serials like, When I Met Your Mother, or so many of them, and you can see that they're proficient in yoga. So these people are Christians and they practice yoga. Yoga has taken the world by storm. Of course, in the world, they've forgotten that it comes from India. It comes from Hinduism, what is called Hinduism today. But yoga is so universal in nature. You can be a Christian and you can practice yoga. It's only a portion. You can be a Muslim, you can practice yoga. You can be a Hindu, you can practice yoga. So in the West, even in my country, in France, there are tens of thousands of yoga institutes. Yet in India, in your own university, which is called Banaras Hindu University, yoga should be compulsory. It makes the body supple, it makes the mind supple. There is nothing wrong in teaching yoga, but your country has become so perverted in its thought, There is so much political correctness in your country that the word yoga is dirty. It's accepted in the West by Christians, But in India, it's not used. Where it is born, where it's developed, it is not used. It should be compulsory in all schools. And here in this university, which is called Banaras Hindu University, yoga should be there and have a very important place. Now take pranayama, the science of respiration, Again, it's a very ancient knowledge, very wise, very scientific, You do this, this will happen. You do that, this will happen. I wrote a book on pranayama in French, There are pranayama techniques for people who fly a lot, because it unblocks, it can unblock your ears. There are pranayama techniques for people who do a lot of computer and get a lot of radiation in their eyes. There are so many pranayama techniques. It's a scientific knowledge. you know, and it can be practiced again by everybody, you know. There is no religion in the air you have around you. Neither it is Christian, nor is it Muslim, nor is it Hindu. Again, you know, pranayama in the West is becoming very popular. You know, there are sports people, you know, who use pranayama to improve their performances, like people who dive very deep, you know, they realize that if they do Nadi Shodhara, you know, it builds up their oxygen and they can dive deeper, you know. There are runners, you know, pranayama. And again, in the country of its birth, it's neglected. Is pranayama taught in this college, which is called Banaras Hindu University? I don't think it is, you know. Take meditation, you know. Meditation again can be practiced, but it's universal in nature, you know. Anybody can practice meditation, you know. Take the Buddhist meditation, observe your breath. Now again, what's against your religion? Whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or a Jain, you know, you can observe your breath. It quietens your mind. You get a better memory. You're better in exams, you know. You have less stress in your life. So these are tools of what today is called Hinduism, but actually are universal in nature, you know, are meant to be used by the entire humanity. And here in India, not only they're neglected, but they're frowned upon. You know, for me, a Frenchman, you know, who admires a country, who loves the country, and does practice, you know, some pranayama, some meditation, some yoga, you know, I am aghast, you know, I am horrified, you know, by the way you're going, you know, the way Banaras is going, the way, you know, the whole of India is going, aping the West. I mean, there are good values in the West, you know, but also it's a civilization, you know, in distress, you know. People commit suicide, you know. 3 out of 5 marriages end up in divorces, you know. People don't know. There is no knowledge there. They don't know what happens when they die, what happens, what. They have no idea. They have no clue. Here, there is still a knowledge, you know, that you're born and again, you know, and there's something called karma. There's something called dharma, which is duty, you know. There are plans of consciousness, you know. What is an avatar? What is a guru? You know, this knowledge is still alive here in this country. It used to be all over the world. You know, they knew it in Greece, they knew it in Egypt, they knew it in Mesopotamia. But today it's lost. You know, Christians think that there's only one life, and then you die. And then what? You go to paradise, you go to hell, you go to purgatory. This is a very basic, simplistic knowledge. You know. Same in Islam. You know. If you commit suicide and you kill 150 people, you go to heaven and you enjoy. This is also very basic. You know, there has to be something more than that. You know. So in this country, survived in spite of so many onslaughts. Yesterday and even more today. Today, this knowledge is being assaulted from all sides. You know. From Marxists, from, you know, Christian conversions, from Islamic terrorism, you know, from westernization. You know, the westernization of India is probably the biggest danger. You know, that people, you know, through TV, they think that, you know, if they buy a 60 rupees cream, they can become whiter. You know. This is terrible. You know, this is terrible. You know. This country, which used to be so proud, today you see, you know, this aping of the West and this shunning of your own culture. So, I come back to the Banaras Hindu University. What is a Hindu? What is an Indian, you know? An Indian is the one who carries Indian values and shines them, while being on par with the rest of the world. You know, there is no harm, there is nothing wrong in trying to be on par. I am sure that the university is academically on par with many other universities, but how is it different? You know, it cannot compete with Harvard, it doesn't have the money, it cannot compete some of the, you know, with Oxford. You know. How can it be different? How can it be on par with the West, you know, give that academic values, you know, and then have something Indian? What, for once, you know, I see that in India you don't learn about your own heroes, you know, and heroines. In my country, in France, I am told about my great warriors, my great heroines, you know, my great poets, my great writers. In India, nothing. You know, Kalidasa was probably one of the greatest poets ever, you know, on par with Shakespeare. I mean, there are Western scholars who have said, you know, that Kalidasa is on par with the greatest. You know, even the translation from Sanskrit to English, you can still feel the greatness. Is Kalidasa taught here in this university? Is there a study on Kalidasa, which should be compulsory. You great warriors, you take someone like Shivaji Maharaj, In France we have Napoleon, We study Napoleon in school, there are huge museums of Napoleon. I was born next to Napoleon's tomb in Paris. Every year there are 2-3 books and films on Napoleon. Some of the laws Napoleon made are still used in France today. We worship Napoleon. We are taught to be proud to be Frenchmen. Napoleon is one of our heroes. Shivaji Maharaj in most Indian textbooks, history books, is considered like a petty chieftain, a plunderer. I mean, the guy was born when the Mughal Empire was at its height, when Aurangzeb was the most powerful emperor in the world, and with a few hundred men, with courage, devotion to Mother India, wit, extraordinary courage, He held his ground against Aurangzeb, and when he died at the age of 52, the Mughal Empire never recovered. He's a great hero. I mean, he was, Swami Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, they all have praised Shivaji Maharaj. But is it taught in this university? There are heroines, in France we have Jeanne d'Arc, Jeanne d'Arc fought the French and the British fought, they fought many, many wars, and one war lasted 100 years. The French and British fought a war for 100 years, and this war, Jeanne d'Arc was a lady, she was just a simple, farmer's daughter, illiterate, and then one day she heard God's voice that, you have to fight the British, and the British were taking over France. France was, in the process of losing its unique soul. I have nothing against the British, they're great people. But France and Britain, they're different countries, they have different personalities, and that's good. That's the way it should be. So the British were on the verge of taking over France. So the God came, the Christian God, came to Jeanne d'Arc and told her, you have to fight the British. And she was a young girl, she was illiterate, she never fought, And just with that, faith, just with that, the word she got from God, she went and met the French king and, and said, I will lead your armies, and she put an armor, took a sword and beat the British. Ultimately the British burnt her. She's a great heroine in France. She's she's worshipped everywhere. Jeanne d'Arc is a... So we French are taught to be proud, of our warriors and heroines. In India you have so many. You have the Rani of Jhansi, you have Chennamma, you have Aliabai of Indore, wonderful, people talk about the Nirbhaya rape, no doubt it was a horrible rape, no doubt, and the culprit should be punished. It's unfortunate that one of them got free. But, in this country, women have been respected and worshipped far, far longer than in the West. And you Indians are not even conscious of that. You don't even know about it, Shame on you. Shame on you, I mean, France or the US never had a woman president. Here you had Indira Gandhi, who was the prime minister, for 20 years she ruled India with an iron hand, and before that you had many, great heroines and warriors, and women, half of your deities are women in India, and yet you go around being ashamed of yourself, there's only one country in the world that I know where woman is so restricted. Whatever the abuses, whatever the rape, whatever the problems, there are problems. We know that. But there is one country in the world where women have been respected for millenniums, and yet you go around being ashamed of being a woman, or being ashamed of being an Indian. Being an Indian has become a dirty word today. Forget being Hindu. Being Hindu has always been a dirty word for the last 3-4 centuries. But the Hindu is a universal person. That's why Hindus are the most tolerant people in the world. Whatever excesses there are excesses. Because they believe, that God can manifest himself or herself at different times and with different names using different scriptures. This is that knowledge, with part of that knowledge, that God has manifested. Okay, there might be a million deities, but there is one God, and he or she manifests himself or herself at different times and with different names using different scriptures. Thus, I'm married to a Hindu, my father was a devout Catholic, so my wife had no problem going to church with him. If she had been a Muslim, forget about Christian, but if she had been a Muslim, she would have had a problem going to church with him. But being a Hindu, she thought, yeah, this is also God, I can go to a church, I can respect that God. This is a very precious knowledge, Banaras Hindu University, is it taught here? Please tell me that it is taught here. That in this religion, which is called Hinduism, there is a extraordinary brotherhood and universality that can save the world. Because today the world, is racked by monotheism. My God is the only true one. Your God is false. So it is fine, I'm a Muslim, I believe that my God is the only true one. That is fine. We should respect that. But I should not disrespect the other religion. I should not fight them, with bombs and guns. That is totally wrong. A Hindu would respect, that you're a Muslim or you're a Christian or you're a Buddhist. Any Hindu, you see the villagers, my first input when I became a journalist was the villagers. Actually, I started, my freelancing in Kerala, and I went to do something on Kararibayat. Kararibayat is a very ancient martial art, born in Kerala, that went with Buddhism because it's got many branches, and one of them is fighting with, lathis, with sticks, and another is fighting with bare hands. So it's non-violent. It can be a defensive, it can also be a defensive. So the Buddhist monk took, Kararibayat along with them and brought it to China, where it became the Shaolin boxing, what's called Kung Fu today. And it brought it to the Okinawa Islands in Japan, where it blended with the local technique and became karate. There are quite a few Japanese martial arts which still recognize that their origin came from Kerala, from India. So anyway, when I started my journalism career, I went to see these masters in these villages, and that was my first input of India. And I was amazed, that these people, it's a village, it used to be a village martial art, that these masters, simple people who work during the day and as a seva they taught karate in the night, they had this, in their genes, as a Christian I have to think, I have to be good, I have to do charity, I have to respect the others, but they had it in their genes, it's just something that many Indians, even Muslims and Christians now, less and less, but they used to have, they have it in their genes, it's not a knowledge in the mind, it's a knowledge that, God is many and I respect you, and so I was extremely touched by this. And when I became a political journalist, I never forgot this. I never forgot this lesson, that the simple Indian, the Indians of the village, who luckily today are still maybe 70%, they have this knowledge in their genes, not in their mind, It just came down, from generation and generation of, tapasaya and yogis and gurus. So this knowledge is very precious, and yet in India, you are ashamed of it, The Bhagavad Gita should be the Bible of humanity, future, because there is nothing sectarian in it. There is a knowledge there that says, the soul is born and born again, that inside you there's a tiny spark, which is the divine in you. Universal knowledge, What is wrong in teaching the Bhagavad Gita? Every American president swears on the Bible. Nobody finds it wrong there. My country, France, is Christian, in nature, and nobody is ashamed to be a Christian. The Christian values are still promoted. Why does this country shun the Hindu values, which in nature are universal, non-sectarian? Why don't you teach children these values? They'll be, for them, they'll be priceless. It's a priceless value for all your life to practice some yoga in the morning, some pranayama, that boosts your energy. Do some meditation, We live in a world of stress today. There's so much stress. In India also, stress is coming in a big way. Now, a Muslim is proud to be a Muslim, We should respect that, They have Islamic universities, and I have been to a few of them, where they're Islamic in nature, The Quran is there, There are many Islamic studies, It is a Muslim university, and they're ruled by Muslims, and that imprinted there. We know that today the Christians still hold a very important place in education in India. My wife was, she was brought up in a Christian school. Christian prayers we said every morning. The priest or the nuns or the teachers have no qualms about it. There are no qualms in encouraging students to convert, to to study catechisms, to study the Bible. Why is it that in only Hindu university in India, Hindu values are not taught? What the hell are you ashamed of? This is shameful. I'm sorry, I'm a Westerner. This is shameful. It's wonderful to be Hindu. I keep saying, whenever I lecture in the world, I say, how lucky you are to be born a Hindu. How lucky you are. That you are an inheritor of a knowledge, which is so ancient, so wise, so unique. And yet your whole education is made that you are ashamed to be a Hindu. That is tragic. If India becomes a country like the rest of the world, it loses its relevance, and it loses its uniqueness. Even for the Muslims and for the Christians, that schism has come now so much between Christians and Hindus and Muslim and Hindu. It's sad because there's one country in the world where that unity could be there. Why is yoga something Hindu where there are millions of Christians practicing it? It baffles me. It really baffles me. If millions of Christians, who are Christians, in birth and faith, practice yoga without finding anything wrong in it, why is it that Christians, say, in this university, would have any objection practicing it? Well, millions of Christians practice today pranayama. Why is it that a Christian, and even Muslims, in Pakistan, in Iraq, they do practice pranayama? Why would it a Muslim in this university would have any objection practicing it? The air you breathe has no religion. It's universal. The greatest brain drain in the world is that of Hindus. Let's say it, is that of Hindus. Because the education in India doesn't teach you to be proud to be an Indian. You can also be taught about, great Muslim warriors. There's no harm about that. So why is the only Hindu university in India and in the world, not teaching Hindu values? I'll leave you with that.